So last year, Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old boy who was part of an armed militia, drove up to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and killed two people, Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber. And after he killed these two people, he proceeded to walk into the street with his assault rifle, and police drove right past him, didn't arrest him, even though we have witnesses who are pointing him out to the police and stating that he shot and killed two people.
Hey, he just shot them! Hey, dude right here just shot them! Dude right here just shot all them down there! That dude just shot them right there! That dude right here! Get the fuck down there!
Injured straight ahead. Someone injured straight ahead.
He actually, in fact, as you recall, went home and actually had the opportunity to sleep in his bed. He was actually arrested, if memory serves me correctly, the next day. What makes this story even crazier, Kyle Rittenhouse managed to beat all of the charges. First-degree intentional homicide, attempted first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree reckless homicide, 2 counts of first-degree reckless endangerment of safety, and the judge dismissed 2 of his counts. One of them was possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under 18, which is crazy to me, as you're aware, Mrs. Elliott, because Wisconsin law prohibits minors from possessing firearms except for hunting or when being supervised by an adult. So I find that to be completely ridiculous that he even got off on that one. But then the judge also waived another requirement or another law that they were going to hit him on, which was failure to comply with an emergency order from the state or local government. So they didn't even stick him with that. Now, I don't know about you, Mrs. Elliott, but I don't know any black person in the galaxy that could literally walk down the street, shoot a group of people, and then after they shoot 2 people, walk home with their hands up with an assault rifle, go home, get their legal defense paid for, because a lot of these militias and these individuals who actually were with him paid. They actually funded a GoFundMe page and a Fundly page and paid $50,000 for his defense. And then I know this to be true, Mrs. Elliott, that black people wouldn't be able to get away with this because Jacob Blake, a personal friend of my sister's, as you're aware, literally was shot 8 times in his back and his side last year. I believe it was even in the same month that the Kyle Rittenhouse thing took place. So the question I have for you today, Mrs. Elliott, is what type of message is this sending to Black America or Black people in general? Is it saying that if you protest, if you support Black Lives Matter, if you support Black people who are peacefully protesting, that ultimately your life, no matter if you're white, Black, or Asian, will be just as devalued?
Okay, here's what you have to remember. This is the way the United States of America runs its legal system. If you haven't read the book, The Color of Law, you don't understand that lawyers are no better than anybody else when it comes to understanding that there's only one race. They are doing what they have been educated to do, which is treat those who are of color less fairly than they treat those who are pale faces. That's the way it is. However, everybody knows that Kyle Rittenhouse broke the law. He killed 2 people and wounded another one. He had a really bad judge and an absolutely unable to conduct a case prosecutor. If the prosecutor had done his work right, if the judge had done his job right, this could have been different. And we know it could have because today, just this morning, a judge allowed 3 white males to be found guilty of murder in the case of Ahmaud Arbery.
Right.
This can make all the difference in the world. Now, perhaps they can't go back and retry this little fool, but they haven't tried him on the first 2 counts that the judge threw out. They can go back and try him on those 2 counts, possessing an illegal weapon,
right,
and having it when he was under the age of 18. Now they can go back and try him on those 2 counts with a prosecutor who knows what he's doing, And with a judge who knows what he's doing, that judge needs to lose his job.
Right.
But judges are elected in this country, and they get elected on the basis of how racist are you?
Facts.
Yeah, facts is what it's all about. And the facts are that they can go back and retry that little snot, and they should do that immediately. What we have to do is rejoice and be exceeding glad that a group of jurors in Georgia found those three men, a
Right.
father and son and another person, all white, all guilty of murder.
Right.
This could make a difference in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Now you have to make sure that we have to make sure that somebody comes up and says, let's try Kyle for those two charges, and put him away for a good long time. If it's no more than 6 months, at least that will send a different message to people all over this country. You cannot shoot people just because you're white and get away with it.
That's
And you
right.
cannot. Yeah. This is the thing. We've got to say to the country at large, these laws are for everyone. These laws are built to guarantee justice to everyone, not just to pale-faced people.
Exactly. Because, like I was going to say, Mrs. Elliott, this is what's going to allude to my next question now is, what type of precedents are we setting here? Are we saying now that it's socially acceptable for, white individuals who don't agree with Black Lives Matter or any other peaceful protest that Black people have to just, if they don't like it, they can just go into the protest with an assault rifle and shoot people, and then our government will then back them up in the law because they can hide it under the guise of defending their country and defending the store owner.
Okay, that we have already set that precedent in motion when we came to this country and invaded this country that was
Right.
owned by people of color. We set that precedent in 1492, and we have continued to build on that precedent on a daily basis. You have to read Whitney Young's book Beyond Racism before you understand what's going on and what we can do about it. He has suggestions in there, and they're excellent. And then get the book The Myth of Race by Robert Sussman. Read that book and read portions of that book to the people in your classes so that they will understand that race is not a myth, it's a lie.
Right.
There's only one race on the face of the earth, and until we all get accustomed to seeing every person of whatever color, whatever gender, whatever sexual orientation, as a fully functioning, equal human being, until we get that done, we'll never solve this problem. We've got to stop talking about race and start talking. If you want to talk about culture, fine, let's talk about culture. But you know and I know that we pale faces take from any other culture that we want to whatever we see valuable. And that's what we have done. We have stolen from the cultures of people of color and pretended that we came up with it all by ourselves, including this country. Your students need to know that only 15 to 18% of the population of the earth is classified as white. Now think about that. Only 15 to 18% of the human beings on the face of the earth are classified as white. We have been in the minority, the numerical minority, since the beginning of time. And we will always be in the numerical minority. And we need to realize that when people say, well, the reason we have this power is because most of us are this color. No, most of us are not this color. And it's time for us to stop realizing how brilliant most people of other color groups are. And you won't realize that until you read the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization
By Anthony Browder.
Yes,
I read that after you told me to read that, Mrs. Elliott. You know you're my favorite teacher.
I'm the loudest teacher you have. You have to get his film strips and his videos and show them to your students so that your students will realize how brilliant what we call black people, have always been. They were able to leave the area of the equator 300,000 years ago and move from there to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. They came to this continent over 10,000 years ago. Christopher Columbus didn't get here until 1492.
Right.
Now think about that. Think about that. But we don't think about that because we don't teach the truth. We teach the lie. So that you need to read The Myth of Race to realize what the myth is and what we can do to put a stop to it. We have to put a stop to it. Today, the Arbery decision And finding all three of those white males guilty of murder is absolutely fantastic.
Because it's a
Now
step in
we'll
the
see if
right
they can make
direction.
it stick. What?
Because it's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction, and certainly is essential that that happened 3 days after they find that little rotten little person not guilty of killing two people and wounding another. You
Right.
know, and I know that that boy is guilty and should be in prison. And if they prosecute him on the first two charges, which he was charged, then they could make a difference in that case too. It's time for that to happen.
How did he get off, though, Mrs. Elliott? Is this an example of white privilege, like you had said once upon a time?
It's not white privilege. It's white privilege should have been called advantages based on the ignorance of skin color. That isn't white privilege. Those are privileges are advantages that you earn. We, pale-faced people, have not earned that advantage of mistreating people of other color groups. We have never earned that advantage. We stole it, and in this country, we did it with force, and we've done it with countries all over the world. And we will continue to do it until people of other color groups say, wait a minute. You got here last. The rest
Right.
of us were here long before you got here. Now it's time for you to realize that there are a whole lot of brilliant people who made it possible for you to have things like an alphabet and a numeration system and a calendar and all these other things, because those things were invented, created by people long before there were any people who had faded in the Northern European countries. All white people are is people whose black ancestors faded as they moved farther and farther from the equator. Every human being on the face of the earth, every one of us, has an ancestor in a black country, because that's where we all came from. All our ancestors, every one of us, if we trace our DNA back far enough, would find that there's a percentage of our DNA that came from a country in Africa. We owe our very existence to people who were brave enough to leave the area of the equator and move to populate every landmass on the face of the earth without any modern technology. Now you tell me that doesn't take brilliance. You
Right.
tell me that doesn't take creativity. You tell me that doesn't take commitment. You tell me that doesn't take dedication to a cause. They had all those things, and they came to Northern Europe, and their bodies, their skin, their hair, and their eyes had gotten lighter because they were exposed to less and less sunlight. Now here's going to be the answer. As the hole in the ozone layer gets larger and larger,
Right.
and more sunlight is allowed to pierce our environment and damage the skins of those of us who don't have enough melanin in our skin, melanemic people, which means white people, are going to be running to find melanaceous and melanotic people to mate with so that their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren will survive in this climate change. That's what's going to solve this problem. Melanemic people are going to realize that, oh my God, we need melanin in our skins if we're going to live with this high degree of sunlight.
Right.
And this is what's going to happen. I won't live to see it, but you will. And when it happens, you say to yourself, that old broad knew what she was talking about.
You clowning today, Miss Elliott. You going in today.
You see, now we're going to get rid of laws against miscegenation.
Right.
For years, we had laws against miscegenation. We're going to wipe those out, and we're going to say, mate with whoever you want to, because we're all 30th to 50th cousins. We all came from the same place. We're all members of the same race. Let's enjoy one another as we are, not as some fool has described us.
Right. Yep. And these individuals at large, and the ones who are doing this, these judges and all of them, they're just perpetuating and continuing the cycle of their racism.
But they're going to die off. Number one, they're going to have to do it a different way because other people are going to know the truth.
Yep.
And they aren't going to be, we're going to reach a point in the next 4 years when all the crap that Donald Trump led us through and taught us to do will be seen as really, truly idiotic, and worse than idiotic, illegal and indecent, and unchristian. Now, in this Christian nation, what Donald Trump should never have been elected if you are a true Christian. The thing that bothers me most when I did the exercise, the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise, wherever I do it, The thing that I learned the most about was how unchristian my Christian peers were.
Right. The ones who claim to be the
Yeah,
most Christian are the most unchristian.
right. I overestimated their Christianity and underestimated their jealousy. And that's exactly what's happening with pale faces today. We have overestimated our Christianity and underestimated the intelligence of those who are other than pale skinned. It's time for us to get over that, and it's time to do it right now. The future of this country depends on our being willing to recognize the greatness of those who are other than melanemic, which means white. We
Right.
can do this, and we have to. We have no choice now.
Right.
The future is upon us. We have no choice. We have to start teaching the truth. You have to start teaching your students that most of what we have came to us from societies of people who are other than paleface.
Right. Right. And that's a fact.
That's a fact. That's not my opinion. That's a fact, and we can prove it. You can
Yeah.
prove it by looking up. If you've shown your kids the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, now you have to convince them that it's telling the truth.
That's right. And I wanted to reach out to Anthony Browder as well too, Mrs. Elliott. Maybe I'll tell him that I spoke with you personally.
You tell him he needs to teach that to junior and senior high school students, and those students need to go into the education system and teach it to kindergartners and preschoolers. If we start teaching this at the early elementary level, we will not have to worry. You won't have to worry about racism when you get to be my age.
Right.
You got 70 years before you're going to get to be my age. Make no mistake about that. You've
Right.
got lots of time to unlearn this crap, and that's what we have to do. We have to educate for the truth, and we have to encourage people to unlearn what they learned before.
That's right.
Columbus was not the first person who discovered America. People from Africa discovered this continent. And it's time for us to admit that, to say it, and to cheer about it, and to celebrate the fact that they were able to do that. But then once they got here, once they came here as lighter skinned people, all of a sudden we found from the Chinese, we got gunpowder. And then we found a way to destroy those who don't look like us. And that's what we palefaces have been doing for about 500 years. It's time to put a stop to it.
Right. Right. So do you think, Mrs. Elliott, this is the last thing I'm going to ask you, that younger people need to read more than ever before? Read
Yes.
and start opening these books and leave all of this TV and all of this nonsense alone?
Put those put your cell phone away.
Right.
Unless you're sick and you're going to need a doctor. Put that cell phone away, turn off that television, and pick up a book. Go to my website, read every book that's listed on the bibliography under racism.
Can you name your website, Mrs. Elliott, so that way we can do it? We can say it here.
JaneElliott.com.
JaneElliott.com. Okay.
Yeah, go to my website and read every one of those books. If they're too difficult for you, then get them on tape. Go to the librarian and say, well, I want this book on tape so that you can listen to them. Because from 20 to 30% of the people you're going to work with are dyslexic and don't hear words the way they're said and don't see words the way they're written. However, if you put a book in front of them with their headphones on, and they can follow along as they hear what is being read out of that book, they can understand what's happening because they'll see it and they'll hear it at the same time. People must be encouraged to read at least. You have to have half an hour of sustained silent reading in every classroom, in every school, in every city, in every town in the United States of America. We've got to get children back to reading. We have been teaching them not to do it because, after all they have to do is listen to that cell phone.
That's right. And look at YouTube or any video that they want to do. And you're absolutely right. Even I know my nieces and nephews to this day are glued to their cell phones. Nobody's picking up a book and reading anymore.
Oh, you go out for dinner and there's a family over there, and every one of them has their cell
Going
phone
over
in
here
their
texting
hand.
like this. Yeah.
At the dinner table.
Yeah.
Oh, you're supposed. This is together time. You aren't together with your kids when they're doing that. They're inside those cell phones, and so are you.
Yeah.
They're all on their cell phones, and I'm thinking, what the? You can serve them slop, and they
Right.
don't care because they aren't going to taste it anyway.
Right.
They're too busy doing this.
Yeah. And they're not socially aware of what's going on and what people are doing around them and how other people are being treated because your face is glued into that cell phone.
That's right. And they can. And if we could go on and on and on. The first thing you have to tell children of color is don't believe history. Do not believe what's in your social studies history book because it doesn't tell the truth.
That's right.
All right? It
That's
only tells a partial truth.
Do you think people of color should be afraid of the judicial system or the police? Doesn't seem like the police seem to have a lot of people of color's backs when it comes to, the law, because either they're getting shot or white individuals are seeming to get, a pass.
I think you don't have to be afraid. You have to be aware. You have to act in such a way that they cannot possibly find anything to accuse you of. You can't change the color of your skin. What you can do is change your behavior so that they can never criticize what you just did.
Right.
That you have to act not aggressively, but in a way that will protect your existence.
Right.
And the only way you can do that is to walk that chalk line that white folks never have to walk. You know it, and I know it.
Right.
But if you do that, you may prolong your life. But if you do something that is in the least bit, can be in the least bit seen as illegal, you're going to be nailed for it. You know that, and so do I.
Yeah.
On the other hand, a young white male can take an assault rifle across state lines, which doesn't belong to him because he wasn't old enough to buy it, and use it to kill 2 people and wound another one and get off because of the ignorance of a jury that won't find him guilty because he's the right color.
Right. He has they used to say, has the complexion for the connection.
Yeah. Isn't that nice? Well, this isn't going to go on for much longer because you're going to outnumber us in the United States. You already outnumber white folks all over the world. We're very close to being outnumbered. We, pale faces, are very close to being outnumbered in this country. So now we have to decide what we're going to do with those pale-faced males who are scared to death that they're going to be treated in the future the way they have treated people of color in the past.
Right.
Fear is 2/3 of what's happening today where people of color are concerned at the hands of pale-faced policemen. They're scared to death that if they don't keep you down, you're going to get up and then you'll keep us down. That's one of the things I learned during the exercise. They were much less vicious to the Browns than the Browns had been to them. And when we sat down together and did the debriefing, I said, why didn't you blue-eyed people get even with these brown-eyed people? You said you were going to. And they said that year and every year after that, because we found out how it feels to be treated that way, and we didn't want to make anybody feel the way we felt. That is the answer to this problem, to realize that people of color don't want to get even with white folks. They just want to get equity, which they are promised in the Constitution. You are promised equal treatment under the law in the Constitution. By the gods of war, it's time to be sure that you have it. You have the right to that.
You're right. Miss Elliott, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out of your day today to converse with me. This lesson is, breathtaking, and I'm going to, share it with all my students and the people who follow my work, so that way they can learn from this, and hopefully one day, share this with their offspring as well, and then they can from there, find a way to live in harmony, with our brothers and sisters.
What you have to know is what Whitney Young said. Black people will lead them because people of color know what it's like to be on the receiving end of this nonsense, and they're not going to do unto others as others have done unto them.
Right.
So that's our hope. The hope is that black people are more civilized and more humane than any of us anemic people have ever been. But you didn't learn it from us. You learned it in spite of us, not because of us.
Right.
You learned it in spite of what we did. You know better than to behave the way we have. And I hope, I'm counting on that. I get nothing but acceptance from melanaceous and melanotic people, because they've been where I'm going.
Right.
And where I'm going isn't going to be pretty for people of my color, unless we change our behaviors and change it now.
Right.
It's a matter of self-preservation. You don't go out into a pack of wolves and act like you're the boss. Now, I'm not comparing people of color to a pack of wolves.
Right.
But that's the way white people see them. They're scared to death because of the lies we've told about them.
That's right.
So, and the expectations we have laid down for them. So you have to refuse to live down to our expectations of you, But you can't expect us to live up to good expectations in view of the kinds of things that happened last week with that rotten little Kyle Rittenhouse.
Right.
So,
Right.
but things are looking up. Things are better today than they were a week ago.
That's good.
They found 3 white men guilty. 3.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
there is a God.
That's the
There is
judge
a
we
God.
needed for Rittenhouse, Mrs. Elliott. That's who we needed.
That's right. That's right. And you'll get it if they decide to prosecute him on the first 2 charges that the judge threw out. It's time to do that. Okay?
Yep. Okay. Mrs. or
All right.
Mrs. Elliott, thank you so much for letting me be your student, and I'm going to continue for
Okay.
the good fight, and I'm going to keep this up for as long as possible. Much love, Mrs. Elliott.